Greetings! Welcome to the Week 18 Early Access Update for Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades. We're going to start off, as always, with a quick sound check. Make sure your speakers aren't up too high. Wonderful! So what have we got for you this week? Well, this week we have decided this is the Russian gun update. The part 1, this isn't all the Russian, firearms I intend to eventually implement, but here's the first 4 for you. So where do we want to start? Let's start with this one. This is the PP-19 Bison, which is a fascinating little gun, not so useful in CS:GO, but I've always just loved it. It has this goofy little helical magazine where basically the rounds sort of spiral in here. Originally chambered for 9x18 Makarov, but I don't have that round implemented yet, so this is using the other thing it can be chambered in, which is just 9x19. You pop this in here. And in 9x19, this drum holds 53 rounds. And we've got an AK style fire selector here. So let's pop that over to full auto. Pull that back. Wonderful. Let's see what the grouping on that looks like. Pretty tight. I've in testing it this past week, I have really enjoyed this one, especially just because we haven't really had a high capacity SMG, something fairly low recoil and controllable. This is definitely up there in terms of my weapons that I enjoy fighting clunk with. We can even fold the stock in there if we want it even more compact. So yeah, let's pop that over there. Let's clear our scoreboard. What next? So we then have the AK-74U. This is basically sort of in the carbine category. It's as far as H3 is concerned, it's in the rifles category, but as you can see here, it's pretty compact. This fires 5.45 times 39 millimeter. Pop that in there. As you can see, way more controllable than the AKM because it's firing a much lighter cartridge. Let's fold that stock up. Far less controllable, fired one-handed. Yeah. What next? Okay, so we've got this one. This is a modern SKS. So for those of you who don't know, the SKS rifle is the Russian rifle that preceded the AK-47. This isn't the historical version of it, which would have, say, a wood grip, not this sort of fairly cheap-looking polymer. But this is more of a sort of modern one that you see quite commonly nowadays. It's got this funky-looking magazine. Let's pop this in here. Come on. There we go. And this very simple operation doesn't even have a fire selector. It's just semi-auto only. We just grab the bolt, pull that back. Oh, let's clear that. Let's take some shots. Love the sound that one makes. Absolutely love it. Boop. Oh, goodness. Throwing it to the floor. Cool. Let's get these mags out of the way. And then lastly, a personal favorite. Actually got to fire this at Battlefield Vegas. We have the Dragonuv, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, SVD sniper rifle. I'm just going to fire this off of irons, but obviously you'd probably want to actually mount, some sort of optic on this. Let's pop that over. Let's do it on semi first. Hilariously long rifle. You really got to watch to not catch the barrel on the environment around you. We're on semi. All right. Lock that on full auto. You'll notice that even on full auto, this fires fairly slowly. Wonderful. I just love the way I just love the idiosyncrasies of this rifle. Little pad. One thing you'll notice is its sort of iconic specific scope is not present yet. I still have to have someone make it for me. This specific model was designed more for this modular mount to use a sort of arbitrary optic. I eventually intend to have a version of it that has that quintessential matched scope with its funky little reticule. So yeah, so those are our new guns this week. Along with this, I wanted to mention there is a new option in the options menu. It's under the gun options here, which is hide controller geo when object is held. And so what this does, if we turn this on, is when you are doing any sort of interaction that's holding an object or holding a bolt back, the controller geo will now disappear. So obviously be mindful of it because, you know, they're still here, ready to be knocked together. But if you just prefer visually to actually have just the item that you're holding in your hand when you're holding something, you now have that option. Wonderful. All right, and with that, we're actually going to go ahead and jump over to the arena scene to go over some changes that have been done to Locomotion and one new option for Fight and Clunk. Alrighty, well, we're over in the arena scene now, and there are two things that I want to go over. We'll go over the quick one first. The first one is that there are now two different options for spawning Clunk. There's the hard difficulty version of him, which is how he's been this past week, and there's an easy version where I've turned down the rotation speed of both him and his turret. I've turned down his linear movement speed, shortened his vision a little bit, and I've made it so that shot plates stay down 10 seconds even longer than they do with the regular Clunk. So if you want to just a less stressful time with him or just want to test out the differences of it, I'd love to know how changing just those couple variables affects how difficult, not difficult, fun, not fun it is to fight him. So beyond that, we have some changes to our locomotion and sliding options. So the first thing is on our locomotion options panel. You'll notice there are fewer options here because I've moved all of the sliding options to their own screen. Over in locomotion here, I'm going to go ahead and turn sliding off. The first thing I want to cover is that we have 4 different modes for our menu button, i.e. that's the button at the top of the controller above the touchpad. The first one is the one that has been basically what this button's been doing for a while, which is that we're sort of selecting a node with our face, holding down the button, and then releasing it to jump to or select that node. Obviously, if we had, say, sliding enabled, I'm going to do that. Turn on if menu button move sliding enabled. So there we go. So we're sliding over to that node. The next mode for this, for the nodes, is essentially pointing with your hand. And you're essentially pointing similar to if you had a gun in your hand, sort of with the top surface of the controller there. So I can point like so. Hopefully those are all within view on the video, which some of you may prefer. Note, if you are in a scene that doesn't have nodes in it, because only the sort of major sort of combat scenes have them, you will automatically fall back to these next two modes if they're not present. So the next one is gaze plus point. And what this does is it's sort of sending out a sort of seeking ray from my face and up to about 3.5 meters away. And if it strikes a wall, it actually moves back a little bit and then casts down to find a valid place on the floor. So this I find preferable to the sort of arcing sort of teleport, which oftentimes it can be difficult to get to very quickly find a point that's right up against, say, cover, if you're doing a sort of shooting experience. So I'm going to actually pull out, just as though I had a bison in my other hand here. So you can see this is moving with my gaze, but if I press it up against this wall here, you'll notice that it immediately gives me a point that actually gives me a little bit of leeway. So if I'm holding a gun like this, my gun doesn't end up in the wall. And so this is really useful if you want to, say, move and come right up against some cover while you're fighting. Let's pop that back in here. Take a look at our panel. And then the fourth option is hand plus point. So same casting method as the gaze plus point, except we're doing it directly with our hand. I know a lot of you will probably end up using this mode. Etc. Cool. Now to go with this, if we go over to the sliding options, I've made a little change here, which is that we now have a dash option as the fastest speed. So I only recommend using this with acceleration off, as the whole purpose of the dash is that it's almost at teleport speed, but is occurring quickly enough such that people who get motion sick from, say, the slow slide that we're doing here likely won't be as affected as the dash, because it's almost instantaneous and perfectly linear. So let's turn that on. As you can see, it's almost at the speed of a teleport, but we still get a little bit of that feeling of movement, so we're a little more connected between where we start and where we end up. I personally like this one the most. And then lastly, remember that you can have both the dash and a slower interpolation enabled at once using the sneak height cutoff system. What this allows us to do is pick sort of a local height, which I might need to add one more setting for people who want to barely squat down, where essentially if you're standing fully upright, you use the run speed, which in this case is a dash, but if you crouch down, it uses the sneak speed, so in this case 0.6, which is significantly lower, and the moment I stand up, it will just revert to the dash speed. So you can even slowly come around a piece of cover, and if you see something, jump up and immediately complete your move quickly.
Yo! So that's pretty much the whole release this week. There are a couple other sort of minor tweaks and changes. There were still some bugs with the 12-gauge break action shotgun that are fixed now. I fixed the cover in the arena, so Klunk's rounds should no longer just be sort of like bloop through the other side of it. That's actually if you're curious why that was happening, basically the math that I'm using for doing round penetration sort of falls apart at really low velocities, i.e. Klunk's projectiles are only firing at like 18 meters a second, but I've lowered their gravity so they actually still have a flat trajectory, and obviously doing sort of unrealistic things like that and feeding it into my terminal ballistics model made unusual things happen, in that the rounds sort of burrow their way through the wood panels slowly and then still sort of come out at a fairly high arc because gravity is at 1/10 intensity for them. So I just made them impenetrable again while I sort of rethink the way that I'm doing a whole bunch of that stuff. Also, I forgot to show this actually in VR, but one thing that's been added to the Mk18 and the M4 is a bolt catch button. Obviously, you know, if you click left on the touchpad, that will release the bolt. If you press sort of right on that and hold it down and pull the charging handle back, you can now lock the bolt to the rear. So if you want to do that before loading in a magazine, you can now do that. So yeah, and I've tweaked a few of the sort of magazine unload sounds. I realized I was using an outdated sample that was a little crappy, so I trimmed a few little things as I was doing all the sound mixing for the new rifles. So yeah, so what's coming up next? Basically, next week is going to be largely another firearm-related release, in part because I actually got a whole bunch of those done this week to about 80 or 90%. As I'm going to be working on a new environment that's going to take longer than a week to do. I'm going to do a release next week, and then there's going to be a week break, in part so I have time to finish the environment, and also because Deus Ex Mankind Divided is coming out on, not next Tuesday, but the Tuesday after, so I'm just going to be busy for a couple days playing that. But after that 1 week hiatus for what will be our 20th early access update, I'm going to have a new environment in the sort of Gunnasium side of things, but with a couple new sort of concepts and actions related to the Locomotion that hopefully do some more cool things with it. I know a number of people have been asking when I'm going to do a follow-up to that prototype, and I've been brainstorming on it now for a couple weeks, and I'm really excited about it. So yeah. So with that, I hope you enjoy the new toys this week, and give the new Locomotion things a try. I would really love to know if you end up especially trying out a whole lot of them, Fight Against Clunk. Let me know on our H3VR. Maybe I'll start just a dedicated thread for it, or on the Steam community, what setup you end up picking for yourself and what loadout you were using with that setup. There's now, if you count dash or not dash, there's 16 permutations now for the setup and sort of discrete types for the menu button, and if you actually count all of the different speed options and acceleration options, it's probably a couple hundred. So I'd really like to know what you end up finding to be your ideal setup and speed combination, and how that affects the experience of sort of dodging around and fighting Clunk. So yeah, so I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next Friday. Peace.